We will start with our first commentator, and this is Reinhard Grünwald, senior scientist at the Office of Technology Assessment at the German Bundestag, TAB. No relationship to the director Grünwald, it's written differently. He studied physics, chemistry, philosophy, and history of sciences at the University of Stuttgart, at the Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario, and at Hamburg University. His main areas of interest are energy, climate change, environment, and key technologies. Now, Reinhard, you have worked quite a bit also with local communities in the energy sector, and in any case, you have a lot of experience in TAB, and we would like very much to hear about your experiences. So, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Miltos, for the friendly introduction. And I have taken a seat and made it a bit comfortable because I want to tell a little story this afternoon about a project that we have just finished in TAB, which has a very awful name. It's called Balance of Interests in Infrastructure Projects, Options for Action with Regard to Communication and Public Participation. Don't get too put away by this ugly title. What was this project about? As a background, you may know that Germany is in the process of undergoing a deep transformation of the energy sector. We want to produce basically all our energy by renewables at the mid of the century. In the electricity sector, what is the consequence, of course, is we need more another infrastructure. You need more power lines. The narrative is you need power lines to transport the wind power, which is generated in the north of Germany, and you need to have these lines that this power can be transported to the south of Germany, because in the south of Germany there is not so much wind, and all the nuclear reactors that are standing in the south of Germany will be switched off at the end of 2022, which is not such a long time in the future. So there is power lines to be built throughout Germany, a lot of them. And what happened about 9 months ago was that one member of parliament approached us and he cried, "Help! I have a problem." And actually this cry for help came a little bit in disguise. Actually what he said was, you guys at TAB, you are writing these 150 thoroughly researched reports, and they are of absolutely no help for my political daily work, because I don't need deep scientific insights into all this business. I have angry citizens coming in my office and shouting at me because there is these power lines going to be built through their back doors, and they don't want that, and I don't know what to do. So what can we do? And first we were of course a bit shocked, that's for sure, when somebody says your work is not useful to me and it's your prime client because he is a parliamentarian, then you are shocked, and it took us a while to take a deep breath, and in the end we said, okay, listen, we can do something new which we have not done before yet, and we're just going to try if this works. We are absolutely focusing on the practical need of you parliamentarians. We accept, we understand that you are under a lot of pressure. There are the citizens that want you to bring their points forward, to address their concerns and everything. There are the power line operators who want you to make a very smooth process through this transition and allow all these new built power lines to be made very quickly and in the time frame that is required. There are decisions being taken in Berlin about the future of the energy infrastructure, and the big politics wants the parliamentarian to justify these decisions also at home in their constituencies. So the parliamentarians are in the middle of a big struggle, and not all of them actually are experts in this area. The German parliament works very on a division of labor kind of mode. So there are parliamentarians who have absolutely no interest in energy policy and in environmental policy because they focus on something completely different. But all of a sudden they are in the middle of this struggle, and actually they are quite helpless. So we said, okay, we make a very short project, just 6 months, which is a revolution for TAP. Usually our project phase are much longer. We don't produce a 150-page report, but just a short manual where there is very practical advice how you can organize the communication and the participation in your constituency. Very practical things. So, for example, things like if you have an expert, make sure that he is not taking more than 20 minutes in his presentation. Make sure that you have enough time for questions to be asked, that everybody can ask every question they might have, so you need a lot of time. Make sure that you don't have somebody sitting up there and staring down at the publics, but you have eye-to-eye level. This kind of practical kind of advice. And what we did was we organized also 2 round-table discussions in the parliament. One was in October and the other one was just a month ago, where we invited all the parliamentarians to come and to discuss with us and with each other, no matter what their party affiliation and their personal standpoint on this issue was, to just discuss with each other the problems that they have, which are very, very similar, no matter if you're a social democrat or a Christian Democrat or from the left party or from the Green Party. They all have pretty much the same problems. And this roundtable discussion was really something that was unique for the Bundestag. We had 3 hours on an afternoon. We had a participation of 12 to 15 MPs sitting there for 3 hours, which never happened as long as I'm in TAB, and I don't know, maybe Leo can say if he has experienced something before that. This is really outstanding. And the discussion atmosphere was also outstanding. After the discussion, some staffers from the members of parliament approached us and said, I have never seen such a type of discussion in the Bundestag. It was like a group therapy. Everybody was opening their hearts and accepting point of views and really listening to each other. That was really amazing. And we had a second round table where for us it was the important point was there were people coming back. They were there the first time, they were coming back the second time also for 3 hours, which was something that obviously they had cherished this type of discussion, and they came back. And there were also new ones. And later we found out that this project was so prominently discussed in between, at lunchtime, between the MPs and their staffers and everything, and it made an impact in the attention of the parliamentarians that was really completely unexpected and completely unique as far as that is concerned. What we also did was we traveled to constituencies of a number of parliamentarians who volunteered to say, okay, I want you to come and to see what the situation in my constituency is like. And so we went there, we went to meetings that they organized, we looked at how they did it, try to draw conclusions about the format and if it was suitable or not so suitable. And we also went in Berlin, visited some of the MPs in their offices for one-to-one, face-to-face discussions, and also these meetings were very, very interesting for us and also for the members of parliament. So, was this project a success? For TAP, I think you can say yes, it was a success because it was an exceptional response. Even the guy who said, your outputs are never relevant for my practical work, later came to us when he got this little manual and said, good work. If I only had this earlier, then it would have saved me a lot of trouble. Yeah? Because that may be one thing I can tell. This guy, he organized a big meeting in a town hall with 1,000 people coming about this power line which is going through the city. And he was sitting himself on the podium. And everybody was shouting at him and with whistles and everything of the full program. And so you can understand that the pressure that he was in. It was also a success, I think, because we were able to contact a different group of parliamentarians who usually are not prime customers of our work. The ones that are not in the Committee for Education, Research and Technology Assessment or are not in the Environmental Committee, but, for example, are in the Committee for Health. There are very little of them, only very punctual. If one topic is of interest for them, have contacts with TAB, and here we had the possibility to really make contact to a lot of them, which of course is good for for TAB because we have to be well known in the Parliament, and you can improve on that. So. In terms of that, I think it was a success. Are we going to do this again? Maybe, but I think it's kind of difficult to find, or you have to really look out for topics where this is really applicable, and you have to find the right topic where you can do an activity like that. So. That was my little story about the project, and now I leave it up to you to decide if this was sort of a new horizon for TA, or a new horizon for TAB at least, or if you think that this was not TA at all. At most it was some kind of counseling or consulting or whatever, and what you're doing is you sell the soul of TA to the devil of dirty politics, and I think I leave that up to you to decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Reinhard. I think we can go then. Yeah, you introduced a new role for TA. Once we tried to have a matrix with the roles of TA, as bridge builder or policy broker, now you introduced as a group therapy. So that would be an interesting thing to take up. Our next commentator is Peta Ashworth. Peta is the Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Queensland, but most of us know her as a leader of the Science into Society group of CSIRO in Australia. She is a leading researcher in understanding public perceptions of climate change and low emission technologies. And Peta, you're far away, but you're culturally very close to us. You even take part in the Eurovision competition nowadays.
I thought that was for me, actually.
No, not yet, Peta. Don't. There is time for that. So tell us, what is going on down under?
Yeah, I will. I will love to. And can I just say thank you? It's a real honour to be here. And I was reflecting on this discussion about family, because in actual fact, when I'm in Australia and I talk about Peta and EPTA and I say they're just such lovely people, it's like you belong to a family. And so I'm really interested and intrigued to hear that continues. And Reinhard, I enjoyed your presentation because one of the things that I've said at CSIRO and I say it at the university is that politicians are people too. And they come to Parliament for all sorts of reasons, and how can we expect them to know about all the things that we love and cherish and are interested about? And I actually think it's a role that we need to be playing. But in CSIRO, as the national research, they're very nervous about how to engage with politicians. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, I suppose, I presented 2 years ago here around the opportunities for TA in Australia, and just to share a little bit of the thinking of where it's got to, and also what's happened with our politics and how that plays into this a little bit. So I've made a few notes because I tend to move all over the place just to keep me on track. And I guess also one of the things that I wanted to say is that we became an observer of the Peta project, probably a distant observer. But what I think around this science and technology and TA is that so many of the topics, they are global in nature. But obviously there's different cultures that come into play, but I think that's the thing for me as a researcher is looking for synergies and not reinventing the wheel. With research, there's always limited dollars. And so when I look at what's on the program for Peta, whether it's ageing, genomics, climate, energy, all of these issues, they're issues that we're dealing with back in Australia as well. And so the shared expertise, the shared approaches is something that I found was really relevant to the work that we were doing, and especially in the group Science into Society. So one thing that I've noticed, I suppose, I was lucky enough to go around and interview many of this wonderful family, and TA is such an accepted concept here. It's just all part of the language that you use. But when I went back to Australia and started interviewing people with CSIRO, you couldn't just say technology assessment. It's like, what's that? You almost had to talk about the intended and unintended. You always had to follow up with something. And that became a bit of an issue. The people that knew TA, when I observed it in Australia, they probably had grown up in Europe, done some research in Europe, or in the US, so it was more familiar to them. So this whole issue of language, I think, is quite an issue. And one of my personal experiences when I was going to the University of Queensland, because I still do believe that we can be much more coordinated in our technology assessment in Australia. To me, it's very sporadic, and I think there's an opportunity to bring that together to find those synergies. And I talked to the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research, talking about this idea and talking about the wonderful things that you achieve over here in my mind. And he went straight to that idea of technology arrestment, which I'd heard you talk about, the negative side. He was an engineer. Oh, no, you can't do that. But then when we talked more, he said, this is exactly what we need to be doing. You have to go and find a new name. So that's something that I'd like to, for our next horizon, is something for you to perhaps think about, and I'm sure you have thought about that. But it's very accepted here, technology assessment, as part of this. And then we've been thinking about the responsible research and innovation. It doesn't come up in Australia as a term. Is that a way to sort of bridge this gap? I'm interested to hear a little bit more about that, I suppose. So that's one of the things that I think is quite challenging for us. The other thing that I've sort of thought about with CSIRO is we're very strong on industry funding. We get a large chunk from government, but also industry is very important. We're all about commercialising new technologies, and that's, it's that whole thing of having the dollars for funding. And I wonder where that fits with some of this, because it seems to really be a priority in the National Research Organisation for the work that we do. So what I've looked at, the type of TA that seems to go on tends to be more at that expert TA level. It seems to be the focus. So, for example, the 30-day contact lens, industry came to us and said, we think this is the next big thing. And so it became the priority for the industry and priority for the scientists, and they brought 60 or 70 people, a big team together to develop the 30-day contact lens. Then later it was, you'd see that end engagement is the way. So it's almost like it's the thing at the end is when citizens are brought in. So there's none of that participation very early on. And I guess that's what we've been trialling with our work, is how do you set up some of these engagement processes, not just with politicians, but also with the public, in a place where probably deliberation and debate doesn't carry out in such a way, I think. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I guess that's where I'm interested in trying to move that forward. And And I think the other thing also similarly with universities is that there's some great knowledge and great science going on, but it almost becomes that there's, should I say it, competition. We know that different scientists have their own egos, we all do, but I actually think that that gets in the way of moving things forward, and that's where I think this idea of trying to borrow the concept of TA and bring it to Australia could actually really create some great synergies and sort of open up the borders. But I guess the other thing, the sort of sad reality is what's happening with science in Australia right now with changes of government, and I guess we're all subject to political will. So we do have a chief scientist. Many of you probably may have heard Ian Chubb. The good news is yesterday his position was renewed till the end of 2015. They're actually starting a search for a new chief scientist. I was thinking maybe we could get someone from the TA community to apply for that, and that could be a way to infiltrate the system, I'm not sure. But it just came to me as I was reflecting on this last night. But just to give you the sort of state of play of where we're at, I think there's been quite a divestment in science over the last little bit. It's the first time since 1931 that we actually don't have a Minister for Science. We have a Minister for Industry and Science, but if you go to his website, it's the Minister for Industry. And the rationale is that they're bringing the science in to get entrepreneurship and so forth. But that sends a strong signal, I think, to the community. Last year, in the last budget, $450 million were cut from science, and that's on the back of $470 million over the last two. So we all have this challenge of funds, but I think it actually plays into the challenge of where do we start these new ideas. In the last budget, no major provision for international research collaboration, changing fee structures, which are actually making it harder for PhDs. So all of this is, I think, something that we can't take for granted. And so then you start to think, well, what's happened to that we've fallen into this trap, I suppose. But I guess it's a challenge, but I'm a very positive and looking for opportunities. So the synergies of TA, I think, is something that we could pitch to our government and thinking about actually how do we bring this together and the collaborations that I see happen here through PCETA and EPTA. And so I think there's a real opportunity to think about that, and I'd love, in the discussion to have you think about that as well. The other opportunity is we do have the Learned Academies. There's the Australian Coalition of Learned Academies, and they had about 6 different priorities that the Chief Scientist put out. And I'll just read you the title of this one. Technology in Australia's Future, New Technologies and Their Role in Our Security, Cultural, Democratic, Social and Economic System. So large chunk, but I think what's happened, it's been almost like a 2-3-year project, and they've run a series of workshops and consulted broadly, and there's nothing new for you, I think, as a TA, but I think the exciting thing is that they're going to release this report in July, and there'll be opportunity there because they're making suggestions about the new way forward. And I think that on the back of that, there could be opportunity to start to pitch some of this. So I guess that's my challenge, or our challenge in Australia, and looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peta. So I take it if we are to export TA outside of Europe, we need to rename it, perhaps. I don't know, something like technology assessment / not harassment, or something like this. Please, Reinhard, come as well. So there will be an opportunity, plenty of opportunity to have comments and to ask general questions later on. But now, in order not to lose the focus, I would like to have some questions on these 2 commentaries you just heard. If you need some kind of particular, let's say, a comment, some more elaboration of what you heard, and please feel free to ask any question at all. I think we have some. We have microphones. Yeah, you just raise your hand, and then you will be given a microphone. 1, 2 already. Okay.
Just a quick question. Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
When you, it's to Reinhard, when you were talking about the success and the large participation of the second meeting, you mentioned health. And that because of that, it occurs to me whether your work is mainly presented to the Commission on Science Education and Technology Assessment, or when there are issues concerning health, transportation, you name it. So probably besides the budget commission, almost all commissions should be concerned with various advice which can come from your organization or TA in general. So is it rare or usual to have other committees in contact with you?
No, we have regular contacts to all the committees, but the Committee for Education, Research and Technology Assessment has a special role. And actually it is that when we deliver our studies, we present them in this committee, no matter what the topic is about. And actually this is something we start to rethink if this is really a good idea to present all the studies through this committee, or if it's not sometimes better to target the committee who is primarily concerned with the question. But that's up to now proved a little bit difficult. But of course, when the study is accepted, it will get an official printed matter number of the Bundestag, which is typically German, but it means that this is an official document that has to go through the committees, the concerned committees, the ones that are in charge and the ones that are also dealing with this topic. But that does not mean that we are present when this document is on the agenda of that committee. It just means that there is a topic on the agenda that reads TA report such and such, and then it's presented and we say, okay, we accept it, or we would discuss together with other documents, but we are not there on this in this political discussion of these documents. That means the education, research and technology assessment is really our prime customer, if you say, and of course all the politicians that are involved in this special topic. But you know, our topics are really specialized, so chances are that if you are one of the 600-something MPs, that you are never interested in any of our topics, because we just do 10 or 12 topics in 2 years, and it may be nothing that is really of interest of you. So that's also a challenge to sort of be known with all the members of parliament when you just have very punctual interests.
Please go ahead.
We're just reflecting on that. I think one of the things that I pick up is the quality of processes that you use to engage. And again, here it sounds like, so what's been successful actually is you being there as part of that. Whereas if it's the second-hand nature that's happening with some of those politicians, then you lose that, because of course politicians don't necessarily have those skills. So I think there is something in that translation that perhaps if there was ways to set that up, it sounds like it could work.
Okay, I was to Reinhard again. I was quite astonished. Maybe I misunderstood what you the study that you made. I heard that you had a problem, or the politician had a problem explaining such a complex thing like transmissions line and so on. But the study then again was the outcome, or I misunderstood it, was typical basic communication code of conduct rules, not talk to somebody and say you are the small citizen and so on. Was this the outcome, or was it the outcome, was it the only outcome, which is something basic and they have to know how to communicate to the citizens, or were there some other answers how to explain such complex things?
Yes, actually what I did not explain to you was we had another TAP project going on, which was one of these very big ones about power lines. So we knew a bit of the topic also, we at TAP. So it was rather easy for us to address all these questions about the matter, about what is the power lines, what is actually planned, why is it planned, what was the process that was going on before the Bundestag made this decision. Can you say pros and cons, and where was the public consulted in this process, and where are we right now? When are actually decisions being taken? When is the best point in time to go to the public and try to take them on board? And all these kind of questions we were addressing also in the manual, but very, very to the point, not in a scientific way, but in a very practical way. And we could only do that because we had in the background this other project.
Okay, thank you. I think keep your questions. They will be back. They're not going anywhere far away. We go on now with a second group of commentators, and we start with Tore Tennoe, the director of the Norwegian Board of Technology. Tore studied at the London School of Economics, at the University of Oslo in Bergen, and the Free University of Berlin. Quite cosmopolitan. He is the director of the Norwegian Board of Technology since 2003, when he was commissioned to establish a secretariat and develop a modus operandi. And as he himself says, he had the pleasure to try, fail, succeed, and reiterate a lot with many lessons learned. His strategic focus, his group strategic focus at the moment is welfare, innovation, security, and openness, and the Norway 2030. So, Tore, tell us about the many lessons learned and your successes and failures during these years.
Thank you so much. Good to be here. Nice chairs. First, I'm going to talk about parliamentary TA, so less about participation. But I was thinking, you could, instead of calling it TA, you could call it Peta. So you could kind of rebrand it, I think. Well, I came in and made some experiences, and I would start with one. We had this report. It was on the energy sector, and I talked to the then chair of the Committee for Energy and Environment. And I tried to be neutral, not impose, not be a technocrat, as I learned at SDS studies. And then, in the end, he just looked at me and said, "So what should we do then? You had an expert group and you had no advice. What's the use for me?" Okay, I said, and went back. And my experience then was that the politicians were not afraid that we would give them some kind of, let's call it recommendations, you can call it options, strategies. But what he explained to me was that he was in a field of action. He's making decisions. So if I come with a problem, I need also to come up with some strategies, some options, or some recommendations about how to handle this. That's how we can empower, I think, the policymakers. If you only come with a big chunk of problems or problematizing definitions, that's just not enough. So that's the first experience. So I have an A, B, C, and D. That was advice. The D is a bonus track. Just a few more things about advice. There are some, you have advice and you have bogus advice. So every time we have a new project, we remind ourselves that there are some general advice that always comes up in every project. The first is more to research. Okay, if that's going to be interesting, you have to prioritize. Okay, less to something else. Are we going to have a new research agenda? what kind of research. You have to specify. But more to research, that's just not saying anything. And basically, research policy is a very depoliticized area in Norway. It's because it's all about saying more to research. The second one is that it always comes up. We need to do more work across sectors. Across sectors. Across ministries, across agencies. And then, okay, but then who should lead? Which ministry should lead this? Take the leadership. That's one question you can ask. And then you have another version of the research advice. It's, we need more knowledge, more reports. Okay, then you have to, I think, assess. So you want to postpone things? So we're not going to do anything for a while? What costs do you have there? What happens in the meantime? And that's a policy too. Another one often comes up, because now we do a lot of projects involving digitalization and privacy, and then strengthen the data protection agency. Okay, or should they work differently? Should they change their modus operandi? And the fifth general advice would always come up is standardization. And it's very rarely that's advice for the policymakers. That's advice for the technocrats mostly. But sometimes it might be for the policymakers as well. Then you have to qualify it. Why is it so important? What's happened with it? So, in general, we need to look at what's changing. Why is the technological development a game changer? Why is it important? But also, how does it link to an existing agenda? What can be done? And who should be responsible? Otherwise, it's often bogus advice. Okay, B. This is perhaps a bit far-fetched, but I call it B because it's both sides now. There's a reference there. I think as TA institutions we have a huge advantage because we have in our mandate to cover the whole package. The upsides and the downsides, opportunities and the threats. So often politicians are faced with businesses, they are saying, we have the solutions, we look at opportunities, and you have the SDS or the sociologists or any of you who cover the problems. So often people are angry with us, the business will be angry with us, and some researchers will be angry with us for focusing on risks in the nano project or talking about risks at all. And the SDS community would be angry with us for saying nice things about drones. But I think this has to do with being the honest brokers. And one advantage in our position is politicians too are faced with both sides. And I think especially early in the cycle, when you place a new item on the agenda, you can define it. Later on, perhaps it's more partisan. But still, both sides. Then, C, for credibility. And that's our main capital. And it has some aspects, and Peta touched on independence, and I think financial independence is important. And that's something that differentiates us. We also try to always be very fair and treat different political actors equally, informed at the same time. Third point with credibility is transparency. So we always make it a rule to be very open about our knowledge process. How did we reach these conclusions? For example, if you have an expert group, who was there? What kind of hearings did we have connected to it? Who were there? We always make experts sign the products or the reports. And they also can have dissents, but they need to be productive. Also, we have no anxiety about inviting other people than academics in our expert groups. We can NGOs, industry, and so on. As long as the group itself is unbiased. But the general rule is, if you have a locked position, you're not a member of our expert groups. Then you can come at the hearing. The fourth rule in credibility is stay close to the policymakers, face-to-face conversations, get feedback, but stay out of politics. So if you ask a lobbyist or a communication advisor, would say you need to put together an alliance of different actors, different parts of the electorate and business to get really something on the agenda. We always stay out of that. Then it's D for debate. That's the last one. We have as part of a mandate to stimulate public debate. You can't, I think, as a rule, to do that effectively, you need to take a position. If you're everywhere and you're just on the one side, other side, third aspect, it's rarely that you can really further the public debate, in the newspapers at least, or in TV. I also think it's very, very useful to talk to journalists, because they ask mostly the same questions as the politicians. They should be read or listened to by the same people, and about things that deserve a place on the agenda. I once asked the communication advisor for to the Prime Minister what was the golden rule for handling press. And she said, always answer, never lie. Basic rules. Always pick up the phone and never lie. I think that's a good rule. I think if you want to be in the discussion, set the premises, you have to accept to be casted sometime. If you want to be on the TV news, they need, for some drama, they need one pro, one against, for example. Even though we have, of course, looked at both sides, or 3 sides, or 4 sides, I need to take a position there as long as our reports have all the considerations. Just accept it. The politicians understand it. They know this. They've been so much in contact with the press. So how hard can we criticize existing policies? Well, there's the oldest trick in the book. Norway should do this or that. Or Germany is lagging behind. Or Holland. No. That is, of course, synonymous with the government, but it's okay. But we never go and clinch with politicians or parties. But of course, NGOs, unions, industry, well, no problem. And when we did one project where we criticized, we said that basically we said there's free choice of hospitals and treatments in Norway. And we said it's a bluff, because we don't know anything about it, no quality information. This had the front page of the leading newspaper. And it also staged TB debate about it. And then I met the people in the Ministry of Health and said, well, are you angry at me? No. We got to meet we were moved up to the minister. The minister had the attention of the prime minister, and this was suddenly something on the agenda. So everyone was happy. I was a bit surprised how it worked. Okay, so last point, just an afterthought. It might be a paradox that we are based outside of Parliament, with a mandate to inform the Parliament. Sometimes it feels that we are closer to politics than people in Parliament, because they are tied, the negotiations are already done about the topic. So our challenge is to make a gift to the politicians that they didn't know they wanted, and they will love it, or feel that it actually empowers them. And when we do something, we always listen very carefully to what kind of questions we get back, what kind of response we get back. And if nothing happens, if we get no response, we are the idiots, not the politicians. Thanks.
Thank you, Tor. You had a lot of lessons learned, I think. That's showed in your structure, actually, very clear structure of what needs to be done. I told you we have plenty of time. Take it back, we don't, but we'll try to do our best. And we go straight to our next commentator, Michael Nentwich, the director of the Institute of Technology Assessment in Vienna. Michael was originally a lawyer. Thank you for sharing that with us, Michael. Won't hold you against you, but now he's a science and technology scholar, a technology assessor, and since 2006, the director of the Institute of Technology Assessment in Vienna. His main research field in technology assessment is the internet and its influence on society and science. So, please, Michael, give us your experiences from Austria, from high altitude TA, if I might say so. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, you should come up here at once and see it. That's a special place to talk to you about Austria. My task is to give some insight about from an institutional perspective, what's happening in Austria. As you may know, the tradition of TA in Austria is quite long. We will celebrate somehow this year 30 years of technology assessment with that word in Austria. There was a steady development from a small working group at that time at the Institute of Technology, at the Academy of Sciences, to this institute that we are now. And around us there is a couple of other groups that are doing TA in Austria. Altogether there are eight member institutions that are also in the NTA, in the Network Technology Assessment, the German ones, members there. TA in Austria is traditionally both research-oriented, I would say, and targets mainly the executive branch of government. The reason for the first is that it's mainly based in the academy, in our universities, and the reason for the second is that government is where most of the decisions are taken, where governance takes place in Austria. However, over the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit more or less, according to your perspective, a number of new developments are underway, which I think change a lot what's happening here in Austria. First of all, there are a number of new active players in the technology assessment field. They emerged at several places, at universities. There are new professorships. There is a new institute on research and security research at one of the Viennese universities, dealing with technology assessment, at least partly. And there is also more focus on TA in a foresight unit at the AET Institute. The second point is that ITER over time is embracing ever more participatory methodology on a more or less daily basis. Previously, we only observed this, and this was also true for other actors in Austria. We evaluated, we observed, but now almost on a daily basis we do participatory methods, citizens' involvement in many of our projects. The third development I would like to mention is that our main financial resource, which is the Ministry of Science, only a couple of years back wanted us to become more focused on advice to politics and society. As we didn't get more resources at the same time, we had to make choices, and there is a shift to make, and this means, in a sense, a little bit less of research, of basic research. And as you may imagine, this is a great challenge for an institute which is part of the Academy of Sciences. However, the Academy, our mother institution, accepted that and currently sees synergies, I would say, with its own aspirations to become more part of society, of getting out of the ivory tower of academia. And the fourth point, and maybe in our context the most important, is that the Austrian Parliament is showing more and more interest in technology assessment over the last years. And this, for an academic institution and for an institution which was mainly focusing on the government, on ministries, this is a very great challenge as well for a scientific institute. On the one hand, they upgraded their engagement in EPTER, so we are now a full member, and since 2013, and next year we will even become the president, take over the presidency of the EPTER group for a year. Second, and that's maybe the most important point, since about October, we are carrying out projects for the Parliament for the first time since a long, long time. Mainly it's a feasibility study that we are doing, which is solicited by the Parliament, financed by the Parliament. They want to know how we could institutionalize TA in the Austrian Parliament, TA and foresight activities. And also I think the PACITA project played quite an enforcing role in this development, as many of the Austrian MPs are more aware of these activities and that there are other activities outside of Austria that they didn't even think that there are. So all this changed the dynamics of technology assessment in Austria. I would say more people, in particular in politics, know about it. And the TA-related community is growing accordingly. It's, at least from my perspective, it's very difficult to say what will be the outcome of this development. Probably it is sort of a more strict recognition of strength and usefulness of technology assessment, in particular among the politicians. And probably there will be some institutional arrangement between TA and the foresight communities and the Austrian Parliament. So the Austrian TA community is about to diversify and at the same time to become more focused, namely on politics. And what I mean by politics is including all branches of government. So to come to a conclusion here, I think, and that's probably not only true for Austria, is that the biggest challenge for a TA institution is to somehow guard his institutional stability in a changing environment. And by environment, I mean both the external environment, so Austrian politics and how it functions and how it develops and how interest evolves, as well as the internal environment, which is now for us very important, the Academy, and what it thinks we could do for the Academy and vice versa. And for ITER, for us in particular, it will be a very difficult and challenging task to develop and learn how to do and how to deal are and what modes to apply for giving advice to the Parliament, because that's a completely new situation for us in the coming years. So I hope, put something here and put something here. Okay.
Very well done, thank you. And you saved us also some time for question and answer, which is important. We'll go straight to our last commentator. It's Pierre Delvenne. Pierre holds a PhD in Political and Social Sciences of the University of Liège. He is currently Research Associate of the Fund for Scientific Research, lecturer at the University of Liège, and Associate Director of Spiral Research Center. His areas of expertise are technology assessment, bioeconomy in Europe and Latin America, regulation and development of biotechnologies, and more broadly, science and technology in society. Pierre is also a founding member of the Belgian Network for Science and Technology in Society. So, Pierre, you have done a lot of things already.
Yeah, it looks like.
Tell us what you have learned from that and how you have applied that to Wallonie, because you have been quite involved in this particular area of Belgium, yeah?
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and that's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Indeed, I will speak from this. I've been part of PACITA. I've been coordinating the PACITA activities from the side of Wallonia, southern Belgium, and especially the University of Liège and our research center, Spiral. And so I will today speak from the standpoint of what has been a category that we've been working on. We've been working with since the beginning of PACITA. I will speak from the standpoint of a non-PTA country. So that's a word that we've been using again and again, also complaining about. Sometimes we shifted from non-PTA country to emerging TA country. And sometimes also, and I'm referring to Lars' introductory talk here, we are part of a country where there is a wish to establish technology assessment. So my talk will be divided in two parts. After, I will say a few words about PACITA, and then I will report on the recent developments about technology assessment and its further institutionalization in Wallonia. And then I will also make a provocative statement, which I think should be or can be important to discuss about the next horizon of technology assessment. First of all, let me say that PACITA provided us with an unprecedented opportunity to both collectively reflect and act upon the further institutionalization of technology assessment across Europe. So I guess you were aware of that before, but with the manifesto you're even more aware of that. PACITA pursued the normative goal of expanding the technology assessment landscape across Europe. So we pushed that agenda in PACITA, and within the project we also contributed to some broadening out of TA community. We extended it to non-TA countries, to different kinds of practitioners, to a broader community of policymakers, potential users of technology assessment. So we broadened out, we also opened up usual definitions of technology assessment by embracing or taking into account so-called TA-like activities. So in my previous researches, I have argued that technology assessment and TA institutions, and I compared 9 TA institutions across the world, were actually instances of reflexive modernization. And they could be thought of as located on the same reflexivity pathway, as it were. In PACITA, we were given the opportunity or incentives to explore how the future pathway or the future pathways of technology assessment might look like. We did so, and that's very important too to take into account, we did so in a context in which deinstitutionalization of TA was becoming, again, a very discussed and problematic issue for the TA community, with the abolishment of the technology assessment institution in Flanders, northern Belgium, but also with the rescaling of the Danish Board of Technology. So that was part of the context of the PACITA project, and that's something that is of course taken into account when reflecting collectively about the future of technology assessment. Now let me go through the sort of report or testimony from Wallonia, and actually part of what I will say is actually here in that special issue of the TATUP journal, edited by Consensus Shirts, and there is a special issue that Leo Hennin and Linda Neerling coordinated. And with my colleagues, we have a paper which summarizes some of the points that I'm going to make today. So in Wallonia, and I will talk about the prospects, In the words of Leo and Linda, we might be followers of the traditional Western model for technology assessment. And I'll now explain you why is that. Actually, from 2007 or 2008 onwards, Spiral, our research center, was already involved in raising awareness about technology assessment, and especially we were struck by the lack of institutionalized TA capacity in southern Belgium, in Wallonia. And it was striking because in the north of the country, in Flanders, there was a well-functioning technology assessment, the IST. And Peta, since the very start of the project, I have to say, has played a key, crucial role in strengthening this process of raising awareness, as it provided resources and visibility to not only raise awareness, but also engaging with a number of activities about technology assessment. To name just about a few, we organized parliamentary debates. There were 2 summer schools engaging potential users of technology assessment. There were practitioners training. There were examples projects, cross-European projects. You've been hearing about that. There were policy conferences. There was a magazine on science and technology and society in Europe. So all these insights were really helpful and very crucial to stimulate a debate and to engage in further action about technology assessment. What did we do during the last legislature in Wallonia? We pushed the idea of technology assessment. We've been quite successful, engaging both the parliament and the government and the concerned ministers, up to the point that during the last legislature, which ended up in 2014, there was a working group installed in the parliament, like a sort of pre-committee on technology assessment. And that was really new to the members of parliament, because they were working with the 4 main democratic parties. They were all represented with equal weight, and it was so new for them, they were telling us, to work across that majority and opposition divide, and they were really happy and proud to think about long-term issues with us. So they were really feeling like there was something important, even though we were, as a research group, as a member of Peta, feeling that they did not really get it, what TA was about, what TA could provide them. So what we did was, in the framework of the activities of this working group at the Parliament, we first organized an international conference in March 2013 with a lot of support from Peta and Peta members. We had a lot of speakers there. We had a staffer from the OTA, a former staffer from the OTA. We had a number of senior staffers and directors from European technology assessment bodies. And we had a lot of citizens, representatives from industry, university rectors, a number of persons, including members of parliament. And we heard like more than 100 persons to discuss TA and its prospects in Wallonia. So that was quite a big success, and we just turned that event as a sort of starting point of a series of TA working lunches at the Parliament. That's what we organized throughout 2013, and I will not discuss that in the details. I can answer some questions about that, but I will present what it looks like in a session tomorrow about training and teaching technology assessment. So in the framework of these working lunches, we were there with a big part of our team. We organized several sessions, and the idea was, you members of parliament, you're interested in TA, but you don't know what it is. So we're going to try to make it more concrete. So we just provided them with a list of topics that could be interesting for them, and they chose 3 of them: aging, cloud computing and data mining, and sustainable consumption. And 2 of these topics were already covered by Peta, so we could provide them with many, many insights. And what we did was, during lunchtime, every MP or the collaborators were invited. Also, ministers and the members of their staff were also invited, and sometimes they were coming. And we were actually having an expert who was giving us a very short view about a topic he or she knew. We had someone from the Radno Institute, Andre Krum, who came for the 3rd one. And after 10 minutes of introduction, then we were engaging in a sort of simulation exercise. We were doing role-playing. We were challenging the MPs. We were telling them, look, you're going to pretend that you would be a TA practitioner. You're going to try to really realize what a TA study is made of. And actually, it's been quite interesting, and I'll come back to that in tomorrow's presentation, but actually the key thing is that they understood more concretely what TA was about. And that year, or that legislature, ended up with us grouping these MPs, the President of the Parliament, representatives from the two concerned ministers around the same table discussing a concrete proposal, a decree proposal to institutionalize technology assessment. It was taken into account in plenary session, so it started its legislative travel, journey, as it were, and then, unfortunately, there was the elections. So the bill could not be passed, fully passed, because there were new elections, so there was a new parliament. So, consequently, that bill was stuck in the legislative limbos, as it were. So it had started its journey, not finished it, and when we had a new parliament, we had to work with the fact that actually we had lost a number of our TA supporters within the parliament, not all of them, but still, although it was at the agenda, and now it's again at the agenda, one MP took that issue again and it's going to be discussed, someone in the parliament, but still now the support base that we had built had to be built again, not from scratch, but almost. So that's about the present situation. And I can, of course, tell you more about that. Now, just two or three more minutes and then I'm done.
One.
Yeah, maybe one. Yeah, let's say two. That's just for the provocative statements, and that's maybe to continue Thure's point. A TA maybe should stay away from politics, and I fully agree. But we, TA community, we should really be fully aware that TA has politics. And actually, what I would say is that in my previous research, I argued that the emergence of technology assessment and its maturation do not occur until there is a shift towards strategic science regime, what Ari Rib called strategic science regime, which is a new regime of knowledge production, where, in a nutshell, knowledge is not, or research is not an isolated academic activity, but it's increasingly connected to pressing social and economic issues. So the institutionalization of TA may well depend upon the emergence of strategic science as a new mode of knowledge production. TA potentially transforms this context by bringing more diverse epistemic cultures and more knowledge into science, technology, and innovation processes. But TA has politics. Indeed, TA stands for a specific, open, transparent, democratic, inclusive, and socially robust mode of S&T policymaking. And as a concept, TA is tied to pushing the democratization of science and technology governance, not just taking a neutral position in R&D policy making. This agenda is often more naturally promoted by policymakers with a left or green background, what Naomi Oreskes would call watermelons. So those people are usually more inclined to participatory decision making. That's just something that can be observed in many countries and many situations. So whether it wants it or not, TA has politics because it's associated, whether it wants it or not, with specific political affiliations, and that was clear in the discussion we had this morning about the deinstitutionalization of TA in the US, and the fact that TA was still, after 20 years, associated with the Democrat, the party of the Democrats. So TA is an intrinsically political activities, and therefore broad designations of technology assessment as a neutral activity, providing objective intelligence, being geared toward all political factions and to the benefits of all innovation actors, risk trivializing and undermining the very policy changes that TA advocates seek to instigate when TA is associated with specific political parties or politicians. So my argument, my point, and I'm done now, is that these considerations deserve attention, at least in the TA community, as they should like to how and why TA is institutionalized, or conversely, why TA is deinstitutionalized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. I think all commentators now, they will come up, even from the first group. So we have asked in the beginning Franz, particularly when we thought we had plenty of time, to give us a kind of feedback from what he heard. Franz Vroom from Rathenau Institute, head of the Technology Assessment Department of Rathenau. And Franz will give us a very short, he promised, feedback, and then we can have some minutes of discussion. Please, Franz.
Very short feedback. TA has a political function. I would say it reinforces the policy myth about strategic science policy. And I think our intellectual honesty forces us to deconstruct this policy myth into 4 points. 1. Do we know our clients? Politicians are people too, I heard. Your reports do not help us. You have an expert group and no advice. Internal debates over party lines, and everything should be action-oriented in order to help the politicians. I think the challenge from our clients is that we realize that democratic debate is not confined to the parliament. It's there, but it's broader. So how do we link our first group of clients, parliament, with the broader societal debate? Second point, we engage people in participation. Or we write a manual for others to do so, Germany. Or we organize it for the whole package. One of the big issues with this engagement is we don't do it just to get the people around the table. We don't want just naked citizens without their NGOs giving a few words that we can form into political decision making. No. We do participation as a part of getting to our advices. I think there is one of the crucial points. How do we become credible and transparent from the participation towards the advices? So the challenge is not participation is not confined, but it's always also for advice. 3, advice. Can we say something that makes a difference? Advice for our clients. Make them action-oriented, but look at both sides. And we have to be close to policymakers, but we shouldn't become party politics ourselves. We have to be close to the press and never lie. But the challenge is, our advices are not confined to the current state of affairs, but they should be future-oriented. And only one of our colleagues used once the word foresight, while I think that one of our big challenges is in that field. How do we link our work to future-oriented questions? How do we do long-time issues, not only today, but for the future?
Thank you very much. Full points for a concise presentation. So please, without further ado, please start.
I have a bit of a provoking question, maybe, because I heard a lot these days about TE has to become closer to politics and has to listen more to the clients. And of course, this is true, and also regarding simplify communications to the political system, so to speak. And this is, of course, this is in a vital and very important and a crucial aspect, so don't get me wrong, but it came into the mind, well, what about the other way around? Because a problem solution or policy advice can only be as good as the problem description. So in this sense, this is a question to the podium, what do you think about to help and to support the political system or politics to better define their problems in order to come to a better means for policy advice in the end. So it's a mutual process in a sense. I don't know if you get me right. So reframe a problem in order to come to a better policy advice. That's sort of the question.
Okay. Which one of the podium would like to take the floor? We will not ask everyone, of course, to reply, but I think that Frans was already moving, yes.
Well, the problem is that's a statement nobody can disagree with. Yes, we have to reframe it and bring it close to the policymakers, but the question is how to do it and when to do it. So yes, we have to do it, and that's, I think, the core problem. But stating it as the core problem is not necessarily the solution. So we know 150 pages will not be read by most parliamentarians, and we know 2 pages will not have all the details that are in 150 pages. And that's the problem of life we're working with.
The question was not about we need a 150-page report which no one reads. The question was really how to support politicians in describing their problems, or actually know what the problem actually is, because there's a lot of problems, of course, ever in policy, but if you give advice which is linked to technologies, for instance, and the problem definition is not precise, or then it's quite difficult to give advice then.
I think you're spot on. We always have this discussion, problem-driven and technology-driven projects. A redefinition of the problem is a very good starting point. You said simplified, I would say sharp, and not cowardly. I would also say our motto is don't be boring. I mean, and go straight to it, to the demanding questions, and okay, redefine the problem and ask, so what? What is this? What might this imply? So.
Yes, if you think about the next horizon of technology assessment, I think there's one thing crucial, that's the political climate. Actually, Peta says that in Australia, there doesn't seem to be the political climate to do technology assessment, while in Austria, the climate has changed. So now there's room for participatory technology assessment, like in Germany. It has changed the last 5-6 years. So could I ask you to reflect in your own country, what's the political climate? And what are the chances for technology assessment or science system assessment or foresight or whatever?
Oh, thank you for that question. It's going to take the next half an hour to reply, but I think there may be a quick reply from some of you talking about your country experiences.
Okay. In my experience, technology is a much more self-evident item on the agenda than it was 10 to 12 years ago. So the winds are blowing in the right direction in that sense. Technology assessment is a word I use only in English. I use it in Norwegian, it's teknologivurdering, evaluation, but that's not what I focus on. I say technology, and I say independent advice, and so social effects, you know. Technology, society, advice, independent. And that is something they really just recognize that it's important, things are happening, the internet, the smartphone, robotics, jobs, climate change, energy technologies, it's all over the place. It wasn't like that 15 years ago.
Climate in my country. It's a very, very broad question, and I'm just a humble PTA practitioner, and since we work for the Committee for Education, Research and Technikfolgenabschätzung, we don't have any problems with that term, as far as I can see right now. So the climate, you see, the sun is shining, everything is fine.
Just one sentence. I thought I have alluded to this political change or climate. One more sentence on that. I think our technology assessors or the institutions that are involved, they can do something about the change. It's not something which happens somewhere. It's there is a link to our work, and I think at least for Austria, it's if you are not working a lot on communicating with the politicians, the political climate would not change. So that's also our task to somehow help this. But certainly there are other factors we cannot influence, like, for instance, elections and new parties coming into the parliament, like in Pierre's case in Wallonia, where then all the activists are not there anymore, and you have to rearrange for a climate. And we have that experience in Austria too. So we are now in a good situation, but it might change. But in the meantime, between the elections, it's work that you can do.
Just one quick. Technology assessment is extremely important to us as a discipline and as an endeavor that we share. So just to make that point, even though I don't use it as a word so much in the parliament, it is extremely important that we have this international conversation about the methods, how we do it, do we do the right things, is foresight a part of it? So just to be precise and clear about that.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment on this with the climate. I think one thing I guess many of you will agree, one thing we have met in Peta is that Peta started when the regression started as well. I mean, it has been difficult to talk about establishing technology assessment in an institution in a situation where everybody were cutting down. That's one thing. Another thing also, which I think has meant something during the last years and definitely meant something for my own institution's situation, was what in Denmark is called the politics of the necessary, which is basically about cutting down on social affairs, looking towards fast industrial production, a much more techno fascination for making money in the industry, being competitive towards China and so on. And that is not necessarily something that speaks for technology assessment. So I think there are things in the political climate that is difficult for technology assessment these years, and especially for establishing technology assessment. I also think, and I totally agree with Thor, that technology is getting on the agenda, I would say again, like it was. And I think it's because of these things that are happening in the political climate, because people can see that there are problems and they're not taken care of.
Yes, shall I directly? Okay, I would like to add a few points to the question for the TA climate in Germany. Of course, yesterday and today the sun was really shining, but it's not always the case. Now I'm in the field for more than 20 years, 23 years, and we had a deep crisis at the beginning of the century. 2001, 2003, the Stuttgart Academy was closed down. It was the biggest TA institution in Germany at that time. The funding in several states was abolished, and I was confronted at Karlsruhe with the postulate of my boss, the executive director of the former research center Karlsruhe. He told us, wow, technology assessment, the people don't like this notion. They think of arrestment and all these stories. Please rename your institute in something like Institute for Innovation Analysis or something like this. So we had a crisis, and we were confronted with the question to drop the notion of technology assessment or to keep it. And we decided to keep it because there was a history behind, there were experiences behind, a community behind, literature, and so on and so on. And then we started to take our power together, and we founded the German-speaking network TA at that time. I wrote an introduction, a textbook on TA, and we renamed our journal. Now it's Technology Assessment Theory and Practice. Many of you will know it. So we put more emphasis on the notion, on explaining the notion of TA. And seen from today's perspective, that worked. Our network is lively. We have biannual conferences attended by 100 to 150 people. We have working groups, we have publications, and so on. And over the last, let me say, 5 to 8 years, I experienced a much larger acceptance of the notion of TA in broader parts of society, the policy-making level, and, that's very important, in larger parts of the engineering sciences. So that was absolutely not the case 10 to 15 years ago. Now we are, in a sense, at that point where we postulated to be in earlier times. There we postulated we should be integrated in all these reflections in an early stage of development and so on. Now we are at that point, and now we have to deliver. So that's our position. So, and I'm a bit, I look forward to what extent we really will be able to deliver.
We will deliver.
Oops. That was very symbolic.
Okay, please go ahead.
I think we did another thing. I agree fully with both speakers, but I think we did another thing. We linked our work to the questions and concerns and positive images about technology for those in those engineering fields and working with technology. Because I think we moved away from the harassment where we, from my perspective, were 8 or 10 years ago, into a more constructive, more way at looking at technology not only as a problem, but also as something that can gain us something if we do it in a social, robust and integrated social way. So I think we moved in our language from the risks and problems towards helping to gain what we can gain from technologies. And I think that's a very important step we as a community made. And I think that's something we shouldn't forget.
Just a quick vulgar tech history. We came from DDT, nuclear waste, and fear of GMs, and we got the internet and the smartphones. And it's so evident that it's a game changer, it's positive, but it also has effects that we don't want. And it's changing people's lives, and it's disrupting sectors of industry. So I think the internet changed TA, basically.